Hello and welcome to Editor's Pick, a War Elephant podcast, episode 10. I have with me my co-host, Christine.
Hi.
And today we have a bunch of topics, so we're going to speed through some and spend a little more time on others. Let's get started with some good news. U.S. Marshals have returned 440 and growing numbers of missing children. And this is out of the number of 2,000 since 2005. So this is pretty cool, and Christine's done some great research on this particular topic.
This is a case of looking at extremely endangered children that are believed to have been exploited. And in these cases, they captured the people who were exploiting them. This has been a focus under the Trump administration, particularly to return children at high risk of abuse and exploitation over a number of states in sting operations. Every year, there are over 800,000 children reported missing. The vast majority of them, of course, are only missing for a short period of time and are reunited with their families. But of those, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children works with law enforcement on more than 29,000 cases of missing children. About 90% of those are runaway children who are at high risk for sexual exploitation. And then you have about 4% that are family abductions, 4% are missing adults, and about 1% are non-family abductions. The U.S. Marshal Service has been working for the exploitation of children, both domestic and trafficked across our borders. And this is a huge increase in the success of reuniting these families, but it's still just a fraction of the number of children who are believed to be used in the sex trade and other exploitation of people domestically.
It is, of course, an ongoing problem and probably always will be as long as people put a price on human life rather than valuing relationships. I mean, we could go Kantian and say people shouldn't be valued as means, but always as ends in themselves. I think it's fairly self-evident, but people have always and will always try and exploit others for gain. So it's good to see that there are some measures that are being effective against this great scourge.
Yes. And it does actually represent a huge change in the way that the government is looking at these cases. And at the moment, of the ones that the U.S. Marshals have taken into account, they now have about a 75% clearance rate, which for crime clearance rates is huge. I'm going to have to pick up my cat. He has gotten very demanding. I will be right back. You introduce the next topic, please.
Yeah, so I actually have some thoughts on the next topic. We were actually discussing on the War Elephant Discord, which is linked in our show description, talking about a couple of pieces and some ideas about populism and what I call code switching, which is the idea that you change the way you act depending on who you're talking to. And some people were talking about how Mitt Romney and Marco Rubio are very difficult for a lot of working class people to relate to because they are not working class. Whereas President Trump is very easy for a lot of working class people to relate to. And Christine brought up the subject that President Trump is an elite. He's always been an elite. He was born into money. He's never not had money. He's had, of course, less and more money over the course of his life, but he's always been very wealthy. And it was puzzling why he is so appealing as a populist leader, someone who appeals to the working class. Christine posted a great piece by the author Chris Arnade, who wrote the book Dignity, talking about how working class people have really shifted from being a Democrat. I mean, the Democratic Party is called in our portion of the states, Minnesota, the Democrat Farmer Labor Coalition, indicating that historically the working class is the party that votes most consistently with the Democrats. However, in the latest election, they have shifted drastically towards supporting President Trump, and Republicans as well. Republicans did well down ballot. So Chris Arnade points out part of that, and then we had another piece that I shared to the Discord, which was shared by Anna Subramaniam, and was written by Balaji Vishwanathan about the appeal of Donald Trump. And he really talks about, even though Donald Trump is an elite, he never talks down to people. He talks very much in a way that is easy to understand for anyone, really. And that can really rub people who have a lot of education the wrong way. I know I definitely struggle with President Trump's choice of articulation, and have for 5 years. But analysis of his speeches shows that he really does speak without varnish or pretense. The idea of reading level is perhaps a bit overstated and poorly understood, but the idea that he basically speaks at a third grade level, meaning he doesn't use words that people with an education at third grade could not understand, whereas Hillary Clinton spoke more at 9th or 10th grade level. And I don't think that is a measure of intelligence. I think that's a measure of what I was calling code switching, a choice to speak the general dialect that the people he really wants to connect to speak. You also see this with some Democrat politicians. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez famously spoke at an African-American church, and instead of speaking in her normal millennial, basically white type of speaking from elite education, she began speaking in a very gospel church preaching way, and that was very much code switching, and that was the defense, even though a lot of people felt it rang false. Donald Trump pretty much always speaks that way, so people don't have the same sense of falseness about his demeanor and his dialect. But it is a deliberate choice because he did attend elite schools and elite institutions and has always been wealthy. So it's never been a case of being working class. So I think that there is a lot of rich thought and outreach to be done from conservatives to working class people. I think that conservative policies benefit working class people overwhelmingly. It gives them jobs, it gives them dignity, it gives them institutions, instead of just replacing everything with the government and expecting people to get dignity from identity, which I think really doesn't work. So I really recommend both these pieces. They're shared on The War Elephant, and we put them in the show notes. So especially as we're about to have a real change in leadership and leadership style with Vice President-elect Biden and Kamala Harris, both of whom very much speak in more of an elite way rather than a populist way, I think it's worth thinking about what opportunities we have as conservatives to appeal to different parts of the country in a sincere way, in a way that is not, oh, we know best, which doesn't work well for everybody, but in a way that shows that we have kinship with them. We have trust. We have shared values. So that's really all I had to say. If Christine had something she wanted to mention about this topic.
One of the things that the Democrats have really done that's alienated the working class is not only spoken down at them repeatedly, I mean, infamously, the bitter clingers remark just really cost the Democrats, not just Obama. You know, that when he said about people clinging bitterly to their guns and their religion, it was terrible. And Hillary going on and calling Republican voters a basket of deplorables did it all over again. But also, I was remarking just the other day about policies that would do things like mandate electric vehicles without considering what that means for people in, say, the Northern Plains. It sounds great to people in cities. Sure, we want electric vehicles. Well, have you considered what happens when your electric vehicle has an average mileage of 20 miles when it's 20 degrees outside and you live 40 miles from the nearest major area where you can go shopping? What are you going to do? That's what working people think, and that's what they hear when the Democrats are speaking. about their environmental policies. And that has played a lot into a lot of this switch from the Democrat to the Republican Party. But at the same time, a lot of Republican leadership has not really picked up on what's behind this. And like you said, Trump captured their imagination because he spoke like one of them. His dialect is that of a Queens, a person from Queens who is in the working class. And I found this mystifying, and it drives people absolutely insane. I find it amusing. I don't mind it. I don't mind at all. My entire family is blue collar working. My dad was a ditch digger. My grandfather was a ditch digger. My other grandfather is a farmer, and not in today's farmer sense where all the farmers have degrees, but in the old-fashioned farming sense where he learned farming from his father, and he learned farming from his father. So that's the family I come from, and I don't have a problem with that. But a lot of people do, and they saw the way Trump spoke as reaching out to them, and they don't see a lot of the Republicans as reaching out to them. And I think that's one of the problems that a lot of minority communities have experienced with Republicans traditionally. And so there's a missed opportunity there. Yes, hello, Zachy. I have a cat who can open doors, and he's opening the door and telling me I have not fed him appropriately. Speaking of an underserved community.
Are you saying that your cat is a velociraptor?
Probably.
Clever girl. That was a Jurassic Park reference, not a reference to anything else. All right, so we have some news on the coronavirus. We have a couple of articles posted on our show notes. First, we have an update on the vaccine timeline. There are 3 vaccines in final stages of approval. The first one by Pfizer, then Moderna, and most recently Oxford. And there were some hilarious jokes about the Oxford comma on Twitter, which I failed to get, and I'm ashamed to say as an English major. But it is very funny once you get it.
I was happy that I got it.
And
I'm going to have to close that door again. I'm so sorry.
And so 3 weeks is the time frame that people are saying when first doses of the vaccine should be distributed to essential healthcare workers and hopefully most vulnerable populations, which I'm very, very much hoping is nursing home populations and other seniors. I really would like them and any people who are working directly with seniors and people in nursing facilities to get that vaccine as soon as possible. So that's fantastic news. As you will no doubt see if you watch any news broadcast, we have huge cases of hospitalizations and deaths. People are really, unfortunately, with the winter and colder weather driving people indoors, we are catching the disease more often, and it is causing more cases, hospitalization, and deaths, unfortunately. As we pretty much knew was going to happen in the fall. It happens with every disease pretty much. So don't relax. We have a lot of treatment. We have a lot of facilities, but it's still vitally important that you take precautions, wash your hands, maintain appropriate distance from people that you're not in a household with, and just think about how to prevent inhaling the virus in whatever ways are necessary. And more than just wearing a mask. Wearing a mask is very helpful, but washing your hands and maintaining the distance are really helpful too.
Yeah, and this has definitely hit close to home. I mean, the hospital in my town is completely full. It's diverting people. One of my friends just posted on Facebook that she works for Meals for Wheels, and one of her clients had a heart attack and was diverted to another hospital. The closest hospital that wasn't full was 210 miles away, and he died en route. 210 miles, guys. And I thought about that. My dad had a heart problem 3 years ago, 4 years ago now. And he needed a quadruple bypass. And he went in, and I'd been nagging him for a while. And he finally went in, and they said, "You're having a heart attack right now." And they put him in an ambulance, and they took him to a city that was 60 miles away for a heart surgery, because that's where they did heart surgeries. But he got treated right away. And, he was lucky. He was really lucky. And I think what might have happened if that had happened now, if somebody's in that condition now, they might not get treated. So now we're in that position. And that's not a good position to be in. Where if you come in with another problem that is not COVID, you might not get treatment. So please take care.
In related news, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is receiving an Emmy Award for his broadcasts about coronavirus.
I thought this was satire. Ian. When you posted this, I thought it was the Babel and me.
This is not the beef. This is a real thing. And it is outrageous. It is. Andrew Cuomo spent the entire pandemic self-aggrandizing, tearing down other governors instead of informing his population. He bullied his population instead of giving them good information. He was not informed. He's still not informed. He's berating reporters for asking him questions he doesn't know the answers to.
He sent all those people to the nursing homes. He murdered all the people in the nursing homes.
And he's getting an award for this. And he ghost wrote a book about his leadership, which has led to the worst death toll in the nation.
Well, and he's directly responsible for the reason we have such an enormous death toll, and then why the pandemic got completely out of control in the first place in the spring. This is a joke. The Emmy, they're a joke.
I mean, the Emmys are all Hollywood awards are a problem for a lot of reasons. If you ever dig into it, maybe we'll do a future one when the Oscars come around, and I'll talk about how basically Oscars are bought by campaign. But the Emmys are the same. And this is shameful. Andrew Cuomo had a very difficult challenge. I'm not going to deny that New York, being one of the most densely populated states in the country, is not intensely difficult to govern in a pandemic. That being said, he made specific decisions that made it worse, that he didn't need to make. And it is shameful.
Who's that lady in the Hunger Games with the crazy hair?
You'll have to be more specific. Everyone has crazy hair.
The one who makes all the announcements.
Oh,
and
man.
is in charge of PR.
Yeah, she's played by Elizabeth. Shoot, I don't remember, but yeah,
you know who I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, she's the welcome lady.
Yes, that's Cuomo.
Yeah,
they're like
media jester.
They're giving him an award for being a real life her. This is a joke.
It is unacceptable that we make now. I think the real reason that they're doing this is because Andrew Cuomo hates President Trump, and he's been very combative with President Trump. And I'm not saying that this is to defend all of President Trump's decisions. I actually think President Trump has worked very hard on the pandemic. I think he's made some dumb choices, but also made some smart choices. But of course, anything that hurts President Trump, looks like you're fighting President Trump, is part of the resistance, must be reported. And Andrew Cuomo has been a really big figure fighting Trump, and I think that's ridiculous. You shouldn't be fighting each other in a pandemic.
No, you shouldn't.
And President Trump is certainly guilty of that, but Cuomo could have been the bigger man, and he was not.
I will say this. Our governor Walz, has actually been really good about this. Not
certainly in terms of not politicizing it.
And not politicizing it. And my goodness, can you imagine the deaths that would have been avoided?
If he had spent more time actually, trying to fundraise for facilities and treatment centers and materials instead of fundraising for posters that aggrandize him and his name.
Obviously,
this is also real. Posters.
Yes. Obviously, Cuomo is running for president. Calling
He
it.
won't win. He's ridiculous.
Doesn't matter. He's doing it. I'm sorry. I when I saw this was real, I just laughed. I laughed and laughed. I'm like, this. I thought this was a joke. This is a joke. We live in La La Land. Only Hollywood can come up with this.
And they did.
They did.
So, we have another topic. The Supreme Court has either, I'm not exactly sure how to term it, but they have approved or refused to grant stays to several executions that had been halted. And this has led to a lot of controversy, particularly targeting the newest Supreme Court Justice, Amy Coney Barrett, because she is a prominent Catholic. I think this is ridiculous because she's one of like 5 Catholics on the court, and almost all of them voted to not halt these executions any further. So the targeting was ridiculous. There was also a lot of racializing of it because some of the criminals who were executed were black. I'd like to point out that their victims were also black. The race of the jury is irrelevant. These people did things that were horrific. Now, whether or not the death penalty is acceptable, Catholics generally, as an Orthodox belief, do not think that it is also irrelevant. But as I think I just made it clear, Amy Coney Barrett is hardly alone in her attempt to navigate the questions of capital punishment in a society where it is legal and duties as a Catholic, which of course was a frequent accusation when it came to the question of abortion, when she let her faith rule in the case of abortion. And since she has clearly found a way to navigate being a member of a society where the death penalty is legal and being a Catholic who believes it is wrong, I think that any argument that she's simply going to legislate her Bible from the bench is clearly ridiculous.
I think we can put that completely to rest at this point. Like pretty much everyone of faith who has joined the court, it's pretty obvious that she is legislating, or she's ruling. I shouldn't say she's legislating. That was terrible.
Right. We don't believe in legislating from the bench.
No, and neither does she, obviously. She's making her judgments based on the law. So the hype, it was really overblown. And we had another great share, which was made by I think it was Phil Polari, that people have got to stop making out this hype that every case is going to be life or death, the end of all of rights. Because we do have a system of law where we have rights and fairly good protections for people's rights, and most decisions by the court are fairly unanimous. So the system is working. As far as the death penalty goes, I don't know how much longer it's going to remain a legal thing in the United States. The public support for it is fairly marginal at this point. It was 17 years with a moratorium on the death penalty entirely. It's only since Bill Barr became the Attorney General that we even have had death penalty cases. There were like 3 in the previous 40 years. Notably, Timothy McVeigh is one of them. So it's been very hard to get people executed federally at all in the last 40 years or so. And the fact that it's happening now is quite remarkable, and I wouldn't expect it to last under the next administration. And I am sorry, apparently my animals are absolutely determined to be royal pain in the necks tonight.
You know, we'd probably get more viewers if you brought them on. The Weinsteins constantly have animals on their podcast, and it's really cute.
The dog was laying right here. And right before the podcast, he wandered out of the room. So now he's barking.
All right, moving on to our next topic. China has been doing a couple things. We have a report from the Free Beacon linked in our show notes about how I will assign it to Howard Zinn. Of course, it's much more complicated than him, but Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States is the apotheosis of this particular approach to teaching history, the idea that America is just one long series of exploitations, oppressions, and dictatorships. This is a lie, and it is a lie that makes us vulnerable to China, whose history really is one long system of dictatorships, oppressions, and exploitations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we really need to be teaching proper history to avoid being vulnerable to propaganda from states that will use the right words of freedom and equality in things like the recent UN Human Rights Council condemnation of the United States, quote unquote, systemic racism. Led by China, which I will remind you has 1 million ethnic minorities in concentration camps for ethnic and religious reasons. If there is such a thing as systemic racism, that is systemic racism. And the gall they have to accuse the United States of this kind of thing is phenomenal and should show the absolute bankrupt nature of the United Nations Human Rights Council.
Well, for them, it's all, I hate to say it, it's all about power. They're really all about serving the Chinese Communist Party. So their oppression of religious and ethnic minorities, I think, is less to do about racism and more about, does this group serve the Chinese Communist Party, or is it getting in the way of our power? Are they a threat to our unilateral control of people's thought and action? And of course, any religion is a threat to their control. Any ethnic group that has an identity past the Chinese Communist Party is a threat to their control.
Well, I recently found out that the Chinese Communist Party has a specific project called the Sinicization of Christianity, in which they are forcibly editing the Bible, having Jesus say that he is a sinner, and leading stonings to death of sinners. There's an aggressive and vicious campaign against all religions. The 100 people the million people I was mentioning, of course, are the Uyghurs, who are Muslims and an ethnic group in the west side of China. But the Christians also under intense persecution and brainwashing attempts by the Chinese Communist Party.
Would you like to meet Micah? Because he is barking and barking.
Go
and
for
barking.
it.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay.
There is also a report that we linked in which China has been threatening one of our closest allies, Australia. This is a continuation of a pattern in which China has bullied and coerced and manipulated our allies of Australia and New Zealand and Japan, and the Koreas through its arm of North Korea. It is making aggressive moves all over the world, not just in propaganda, but also in trade threats. And this is something we need to counter. We need to be educated in not only Chinese history, and both recent and ancient, but also educated in our own history, which leads us to our final topic, which is the true story of Thanksgiving. And I have the clickbait title, Communism Fails.
And I'm very thankful for this guy. Micah, come here. Goodbye. Sit down.
Aww.
Hi, Micah.
Let's see.
He's very dark. He's very dark. Come here, Micah. Come here. Fetch.
How do I make this big?
Can you make that bigger?
I'm trying.
And it doesn't help that he's very dark. He's black. You made you bigger.
There we go.
Here, Micah. Come here.
Aha. Look at that pupper. If we don't get legs for that, I don't know what will.
He sits next to me, usually during the podcasts, and he just sits there quietly. And what happened tonight was right before the podcast. Someone came in and talked to me, and he decided he had to let himself out of my room. And that's what started this whole problem, because the cat followed him out. And then the cat needed to get in. And then, yeah, then he needed back in. So I'm sorry about all the distractions. Normally everyone's all quiet and just sits here. So Thanksgiving, after all the distractions.
So Governor William, yes.
Yeah, the original Thanksgiving, the story that we're told is that everyone was just a terrible farmer. And the Native Americans came and they showed them how to farm and saved them from starvation, and everything was wonderful. Not exactly what happened. It turns out the real story was that they were all a bunch of idealists. And they had signed on to a compact that said, hey, we're going to all share equally in the fruits of our labors. And so nobody's going to own property. Nobody is going to have more than anybody else. We're all going to work and we're all going to get the same amount of food. So Governor William Bradford tried to oversee this administration. And what happened was that people figured out that nobody worked because there was no point to work. And this went on for 3 years, and people worked less and less and less and less. And there was more and more and more starvation. And finally, he said, forget it. We need private property. Go ahead. We're going to divide this whole area up into farms. You guys plant. You're going to plant for your family. And what you plant and what you grow is what you eat. And that's what you eat that you're not getting from anyone else. And more food got planted than anyone could have thought possible. And they did not starve. It took people getting their own reward for their own effort. And the funny thing is that they had to do the exact same thing in Jamestown under John Smith. They experienced the exact same thing. And where they weren't trying to do it for religious reasons at first, but they found out everyone wanted to run off and mine for gold. And John Smith finally said, we're all starving to death. And he goes, countrymen, the long experience of our late miseries, I hope, is sufficient to persuade everyone to a present correction of himself. And think not either my pains nor the adventurer's purses will ever maintain you in idleness or sloth. The greater part must be industrious or starve. You must obey this now for a law, that he that will not work shall not eat, except by sickness or he disabled. For the labors of 30 or 40 honest or industrious men shall not be consumed to maintain 150 idle loiterers. So it didn't work.
Which I would like to point out is what happens every time you say that whatever people produce will be consumed equally. There is no incentive to work when there is no reward for that work.
Even Lenin said it. He who does not work shall not eat is a necessary principle under socialism. It's just under socialism they have to put a gun to your head to make it work. Under our system, people do it voluntarily. No gun necessary. So the story of Thanksgiving is, if you give people the opportunity to benefit from their work, then we all have more than enough, and we are very grateful.
So let's that be a lesson to all of us this Thanksgiving. I hope that you will keep safe and have a wonderful time of gratitude. Please connect with each other in the safest way possible, but don't stay by yourself, whether it's through an online connection or otherwise. Connect with people, because people are what I think we should be most grateful for. And I am definitely
so many lonely people.
So if you have a chance to reach out to someone, in your community, in your church who is lonely, do that. Write a letter, write an email.
Give a
Give
phone
them a
call.
phone call. So we are grateful for you, the viewers, both live. We've gotten some great comments over this broadcast, and we also are grateful for people who download this in audio form or watch it on YouTube. So thank you. Please like and subscribe. We appreciate all of those. Join our Discord. We have great conversations, and as I mentioned, some of them lead directly to this podcast. We also have our core community where we post the bulk of our written content. So please check that out. All of those are linked in our episode description. Until next week, I've been Ian, and this is my co-host, Christine.
And we're all very thankful for the great war elephant community at large that makes all of this possible.
Have a great Thanksgiving.
Bye.